At 05:15 a.m., November 12, 1943, on the northern coast of fictional Takara Island, Allied intelligence recorded an anomaly. Reconnaissance flights had estimated Japanese garrison strength at 2,400 troops. Ground contact revealed 380. The discrepancy appeared in 3 separate after-action reports filed between November 13th and November 16th, 1943. A decoded Japanese naval transmission, intercepted at Station Haipo on November 10th, referenced "Evacuation complete, skeleton crew remains." The Allied command had planned for a major amphibious assault. Instead, they found abandoned coastal guns, empty barracks, and supply caches left intact. In the archives, one line endures, "Enemy withdrew without engagement. Strategic purpose unknown." The question would reshape Pacific planning for 6 months. The morning light broke across Takara's volcanic ridges at 06:30 a.m. on November 12, 1943, revealing empty pillboxes along the eastern shore. Lieutenant Commander Robert Hayes stood on the bridge of USS Prescott, a Fletcher-class destroyer, scanning the coastline through binoculars. The naval bombardment had been scheduled for 06:30. Hayes held the order in his hand, unsigned. Behind him, Fire Controlman Second Class Thomas Chen monitored the radar scope, its green sweep revealing no coastal battery response. The silence felt wrong. Hayes had studied the intelligence briefs. Takara held strategic value, positioned 340 nautical miles southeast of Rabaul, capable of supporting fighter operations and submarine resupply. The Japanese had fortified it for 8 months. Now, as landing craft circled in formation offshore, the expected resistance never materialized. Hayes lowered his binoculars and turned to his executive officer. "Signal the task force, hold bombardment, send scouts first." The radio crackled with confirmation at 06:22 a.m. In his logbook, Hayes wrote a single line, "Silence is its own intelligence." By 07:40 a.m., reconnaissance teams from the 3rd Marine Raider Battalion had secured the main beach without firing a shot. Staff Sergeant James Kowalski led a 12-man patrol inland, moving through kunai grass that reached their waists. The air smelled of salt and volcanic sulfur. Kowalski's breathing was steady, controlled, his M1 Garand rifle held at low ready. They reached the first defensive position at 08:05, a Type 96 25mm anti-aircraft gun, unfired, ammunition stacked neatly beside it. Corporal Eddie Reeves, a former mechanic from Oakland, examined the breach. "Cleaned and oiled. Left yesterday, maybe the day before." Kowalski radioed the finding at 08:12. By 09:30, patrols reported similar discoveries across the northern sector. 15 coastal defense positions, all abandoned, all orderly. No signs of combat, no graves. In the command tent erected at 10 a.m., Intelligence Officer Captain Morris reviewed aerial photographs taken 72 hours prior, comparing them to current ground reports. The garrison had been there. Now wasn't. Morris marked the discrepancy in red ink. Deliberate withdrawal, minimal footprint. The pattern emerged throughout the day. By 14 hours, Marine patrols had mapped the entire northern defensive grid, 23 fortified positions, 6 supply depots, 2 fuel storage sites, all abandoned within a 48-hour window. Private First Class Daniel Wu, attached to a reconnaissance unit, discovered a Japanese Type 94 radio set in a command bunker at 14:35. The vacuum tubes were still warm. Wu, who spoke Cantonese and had learned basic Japanese at the Military Intelligence Service Language School, found a message log beside the radio. The last entry, dated November 10, 1943, at 22:30 hours, read, "Withdrawal order confirmed. Destination sector 7K. Maintain radio silence." Wu photographed the page with a signal corps camera. the flash briefly illuminating the bunker's concrete walls. Outside, the jungle hummed with insect noise. At 15:20, Wu delivered the photograph to Captain Morris. The intelligence officer studied it under a field lamp, then cross-referenced it with captured naval codes from 3 months prior. Sector 7K corresponded to no known Japanese installation. Morris added a note to the file. Strategic redeployment or deception, unclear. As dusk settled over Takara on November 12th, engineers from the 6th Naval Construction Battalion began assessing the abandoned infrastructure. Chief Petty Officer Karl Metzger, a civil engineer from Pittsburgh, stood beside a fuel depot at 17:45, calculating volume. The depot contained approximately 18,000 gallons of aviation fuel in intact drums, enough to support 3 weeks of fighter operations. No sabotage, no contamination. Metzger's report, filed at 19 days, noted, equipment and supplies left serviceable, withdrawal executed with discipline and planning. Across the island, similar assessments accumulated. The Japanese had left behind 4 Type 89 150-made howitzers, operational but immobilized by removed firing pins. They had buried no mines along withdrawal routes. At 20:30, Major General Howard Clark, commanding the landing force, convened his staff in a tent illuminated by kerosene lamps. The air was thick with humidity and mosquito repellent. Clark reviewed the day's findings, then posed the question his officers had avoided. Why would they give this up? No one answered immediately. In the silence, a radio operator transcribed another intercepted transmission, brief, encoded, originating 200 miles northwest. The war had shifted, and Takara was already irrelevant. Over the following week, Allied intelligence struggled to decode the strategic logic. By November 19, 1943, garrison forces had established a forward operating base on Takara, constructing an airstrip capable of handling P-38 Lightning fighters. The work proceeded without harassment. No night raids, no submarine attacks, no air interdiction. CB bulldozers carved through volcanic rock at a rate of 120 yards per day. Aviation Engineer Battalion reports noted the absence of enemy interference as, quote, unprecedented in theatre operations. Lieutenant Hayes, now assigned to harbour patrol duties, observed supply convoys arriving unmolested, unloading construction equipment and aviation fuel. At 11 a.m. on November 21st, he wrote in his personal journal, "The Japanese have conceded Takara without explanation. Either they know something we don't, or they've abandoned a strategy we don't understand." That afternoon, a Navy PBY Catalina flying boat, conducting long-range reconnaissance 280 miles north-northwest of Takara, photographed a previously uncharted island group. The images, developed aboard USS Ticonderoga at 16 miles hours, revealed extensive construction, runways, revetments, supply dumps. The installations appeared new, built within the past 6 weeks. The photographs reached Pearl Harbor by encrypted transmission at 22 hours. An analyst noted in the margin, "New priority target identified." The revelation reshaped operational planning throughout late November. Intelligence assessments, compiled between November 22nd and November 28th, suggested the Japanese had executed a strategic contraction, abandoning forward positions like Takara to consolidate forces at newly fortified locations closer to their supply lines. The logic was sound: shorter logistics, stronger defense in depth, reduced vulnerability to Allied air superiority. At SINCPAC headquarters in Pearl Harbor, planners recalibrated invasion timelines, pushing back operations by 4 to 6 weeks to account for the new defensive configuration. Captain Richard Lowell, a former university professor now serving in naval intelligence, authored a 23-page analysis distributed on November 30th. His conclusion: enemy has traded space for time, accepting territorial loss to preserve combat power. The assessment reached Washington by December 2nd. Meanwhile, on Takara, Marine aviation units began offensive operations on November 28th, launching their first fighter sweep at 08:15. 12 P-38s roared down the newly completed runway, climbing into overcast skies. They encountered no resistance over their patrol sector. By 10:30, all aircraft had returned safely. Pilot debriefs noted, no enemy contact, no anti-aircraft fire. The war had moved elsewhere, and Takara had become a footnote, a place the Japanese had held, then released, for reasons still unconfirmed. December brought rain and operational tempo. From Takara's airstrip, now designated Forward Operating Base Anvil, Allied aircraft flew 340 sorties between December 1st and December 15th, 1943. Bombing missions targeted the newly identified Japanese installations, encountering heavy anti-aircraft fire and well-organized fighter opposition. Loss rates climbed to 4.3%, higher than projected. First Lieutenant Sarah Brennan, an intelligence analyst attached to the 5th Air Force, tracked sortie reports from a plywood operations shack at Anvil. The shack smelled of mildew and aviation oil. Brennan plotted intercept patterns on a large map, using colored pins to mark enemy fighter concentrations. By December 10th, the pattern was clear. The Japanese had consolidated approximately 180 aircraft at the new installations, staging aggressive defensive operations from hardened revetments and dispersed airfields. They had traded Takara's vulnerability for concentrated strength. Brennan's report, typed on a battered Underwood typewriter at 23 Quincan hours on December 12th, concluded, enemy withdrawal from Takara was calculated sacrifice. New positions offer superior defensive geometry and logistics sustainability. The report reached MacArthur's headquarters on December 14th. That same day, a P-38 pilot, 2nd Lieutenant Marcus Webb, returned from a reconnaissance mission with fuselage damage from a 20mm cannon. In his debrief, he said simply, "They're dug in good. This won't be easy." By mid-December, the strategic picture had crystallized. The Japanese had withdrawn from 12 forward positions across the Central Pacific between late October and mid-November 1943, consolidating forces at 6 heavily fortified hub locations. Allied intelligence estimated the redeployment involved approximately 18,000 troops, 240 aircraft, and substantial naval assets. The withdrawals had been executed with precision, minimal equipment loss, no panicked evacuation, coordinated timing across multiple sectors. At a joint planning conference held aboard USS Lexington on December 18th, senior officers debated the implications. Rear Admiral Thomas Kincaid argued for accelerated offensive operations before Japanese defenses solidified further. Major General Millard Harmon cautioned against underestimating the defensive advantages of the new Japanese positions. The debate lasted 4 hours. Minutes, transcribed by a Navy yeoman, recorded 17 distinct strategic recommendations. The consensus: Allied forces would need additional time for preparation, increased air support, and revised amphibious doctrine. The war's timeline had shifted. On Takara, now 400 miles behind the active front, garrison troops maintained the airfield and conducted routine patrols. Sergeant Kowalski, promoted in early December, led a squad through abandoned Japanese positions on December 20th, cataloguing leftover equipment for disposal. He found a Japanese helmet, rusted but intact, hung on a fence post. Inside, someone had written characters in faded ink. Kowalski couldn't read them. He left the helmet where it hung. The year turned with Takara firmly established as a rear area base. By January 15, 1944, the island supported a garrison of 1,200 personnel, aviation support, logistics, and communications units. The war had moved 600 miles northwest. Lieutenant Commander Hayes, reassigned to convoy escort duty, departed Takara on January 8 aboard USS Prescott. His last entry in the ship's log noted, "Takara operation, 0 combat casualties. Objective secured, strategic value diminished by enemy preemptive withdrawal." The assessment was accurate but incomplete. Allied planners had gained a forward base but lost the element of surprise elsewhere. The Japanese had demonstrated strategic flexibility, trading indefensible positions for sustainable defense in depth. Naval War College analysts, reviewing the campaign in a February 1944 study, identified the Takara withdrawal as a case study in elastic defense, a concept that would influence Pacific strategy for the remainder of the war. The study's author, Commander Philip Grayson, wrote, "The enemy has shown capacity for rational strategic adjustment. Future operations must account for this flexibility." Meanwhile, construction on Takara continued. By late January, engineers had expanded the airstrip to 5,400 feet, capable of handling B-24 Liberator heavy bombers. The first bomber squadron arrived on January 22nd, 24 aircraft landing in formation between 14 and 15:30 hours. They would fly their first mission on January 25th, targeting enemy shipping 700 miles to the north. Between February and April 1944, Anvil Airfield supported 1,147 sorties, contributing to the broader island hopping campaign. Takara had become infrastructure, necessary, unglamorous, far from the front. Supply ships arrived weekly, offloading fuel, ordnance, spare parts, and mail. The rhythm of rear area operations settled in. Maintenance schedules, guard rotations, reports filed and forwarded. On March 3rd, Chief Metzger oversaw the construction of a 50,000-gallon fuel storage facility completed ahead of schedule. On March 17th, a tropical storm passed 80 miles south, bringing 3 days of heavy rain but minimal damage. Life at Anvil was measured in logistics, tonnage, and aircraft availability rates. First Lieutenant Brennan, still assigned to intelligence duties, spent her days analyzing reconnaissance photographs from active combat zones hundreds of miles away. The images showed fierce fighting, destroyed aircraft, burning installations, beach assaults. Takara felt distant from that violence. On April 9th, she wrote a letter to her sister in Virginia. "We are far from the war here, though we serve it. The Japanese left this place, and we occupied it. Now it's just another base." The letter was mailed on April 12th and reached Virginia on May 8th. By then, Allied forces had pushed the front another 300 miles northwest. Takara remained what it had become, a stopover, a fuel depot, a place that mattered because it was there, not because it was contested. The strategic meaning of Takara emerged slowly, over months and through accumulated intelligence. By June 1944, captured Japanese documents revealed the withdrawal had been ordered by Imperial General Headquarters in early October 1943, part of a comprehensive defensive realignment codenamed Kansen. The plan anticipated Allied advances and prioritized sustainable defense over forward presence. Takara had been deemed indefensible given Allied air and naval superiority. The garrison had been ordered to evacuate supplies, destroy nothing, and withdraw to prepared positions 400 miles northwest. The order had been executed precisely. American intelligence analysts, reviewing the captured documents at Pacific Fleet headquarters, recognized the sophistication of Japanese planning. The enemy had not panicked. They had adapted. A memo circulated on June 15, 1944, noted, "Enemy strategic withdrawal demonstrates high-level coordination and realistic assessment of Allied capabilities. Future operations should expect similar flexibility. The lesson was learned. Allied planners adjusted invasion timelines, increased pre-assault reconnaissance, and prepared for layered defenses rather than static positions. Takara became a teaching example, a place where the expected battle never occurred, revealing more about the enemy through absence than engagement would have. On the island itself, garrison life continued. Sergeant Kowalski, now training new replacements, told them about the morning they landed unopposed. We expected a fight, he said. What we got was a lesson. The airstrip hummed with activity, aircraft taking off and landing in steady rotation, supporting operations far beyond the horizon. By August 1944, Takara had processed over 12,000 tons of supplies, supported 300 to 200 aircraft transits, and served as a communications relay for operations across a 600-mile front. The base operated efficiently, a component in the vast logistical machinery of the Pacific War. Casualties since occupation, 1 construction accident, 2 cases of appendicitis evacuated to rear hospitals, 0 combat deaths. The island's contribution was measured in fuel delivered, ordnance loaded, messages transmitted. On August 12th, Lieutenant Commander Hayes returned to Takara briefly aboard USS Prescott during a convoy escort mission. He walked the beach where his ship had stood 9 months earlier, expecting bombardment, finding silence. The pillboxes remained, now used for storage. The Type 96 anti-aircraft gun Corporal Reeves had examined sat rusting near the tree line, half buried in vines. Hayes took a photograph with a Kodak camera, capturing the gun's barrel pointing uselessly at the sky. He didn't know why he wanted the image, perhaps as evidence that war was stranger than anticipated, that sometimes the enemy's absence revealed more than their presence. He returned to Prescott at 16 hours. The convoy departed Takara at 18:30, heading north into contested waters. Hayes filed no report about his walk on the beach, but in his personal journal, kept in a waterproof pouch, he wrote, "Takara, August 12th, 1944. The war came here and found nothing. We built where they left off. History will remember the battles fought, not the ones avoided. The war moved on. By November 1944, Allied forces had advanced 200 miles beyond Takara. The island remained operational, but secondary. A supply node, a rest area, a place where replacement crews trained before rotating forward. The Japanese never returned. They had made their calculation, accepted their loss, and fought elsewhere. Allied intelligence estimated the Takara garrison, evacuated intact, had been redeployed to defensive positions in the Philippines, where they contributed to the fierce resistance encountered during the Leyte campaign. The troops who would have died defending Takara died instead defending Leyte. The strategic trade had merely relocated the violence. In archives scattered across 3 continents, Washington, Canberra, Tokyo, the Takara operation exists in file folders, after-action reports, and intelligence summaries. The Allied invasion force logged 0 combat casualties during the landing. The Japanese recorded successful evacuation, 0 losses in their own files. Both sides achieved their objectives without firing a shot. The anomaly was noted, analysed, and filed away. On December 8, 1944, exactly 1 year after Takara's occupation, Captain Morris, now promoted to major and serving at MacArthur's headquarters, reviewed the original intelligence discrepancy report. He had kept a copy. In the margin beside the line, quote, "Enemy withdrew without engagement, strategic purpose unknown," he added a final note in pencil. Purpose now clear. They chose their ground. So did we. The war was fought elsewhere, on terms both sides understood. The file was closed. The lesson remained.